Bonjour à toutes et à tous et bienvenue à notre premier rassemblement d'aujourd'hui de 2026. And a very warm welcome to everyone joining us for our first Federal AAM Town Hall of 2026. You know, it's always energizing to see this community come back together again, and I want to recognize both our long-standing partners and those joining us for the first time today. Whether you've been part of this journey from the early days or are stepping into this ecosystem more recently, we're grateful to have you here today. Now, we've got a strong session ahead, but before we dive into the updates, let's take a quick moment to bring some energy into our digital room. As we step into 2026, a year that is shaping up to be critical for the operationalization of advanced air mobility globally, we wanted to hear a little simple pulse check from our audience to begin with. So for today, our check-in question for you is, what is one signal that you are watching for in 2026 that tells you advanced air mobility is moving from concept to reality? It could be a certification milestone, a new route announcement, infrastructure development, or even a policy shift. Take a moment and drop your answer into the chat so we can get a sense of where our momentum is building across the ecosystem. Excellent. Just seeing these pop up here. Great point there, Amy. Seeing some more of that movement on the certification pathways. Strong signal there. Wonderful, Karen. Yeah, the infrastructure readiness at our regional airports continues to be an important aspect. Great one there, Wade. Yeah, that increased alignment between government and industry is something we're all watching closely. Excellent. Thank you for some of those responses there. So let's dive into it for today. So as always, we respectfully acknowledge that today's digital gathering takes place on the unceded and traditional territories of many First Nations across Turtle Island, now known as Canada. In that spirit, we're proud to spotlight the powerful work of Kuteen Creations and the Be Dear Province Map project, an initiative that celebrates both Indigenous identity, art, and place through beaded designs representing provinces and territories across Turtle Island. We encourage you to explore and support this vibrant expression of Indigenous culture and creativity wherever you may be across the country. We're also proud to share that this Federal AAM Town Hall is powered by the support of CAE. As a global leader in aviation and simulation, CAE continues to push the boundaries of innovation, helping to advance zero-emission flight and future-focused training systems for the AAM sector. If you haven't connected with the CAE team yet, we encourage you to do so. Their insights and partnerships are helping to shape what AAM looks like today. So as for initial introductions, my name is J.R. Hammond, and I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director of Canadian Advanced Air Mobility, Canada's Federal Industry Association for AAM. Alongside our co-founders at the National Research Council of Canada and supported by our CAAM team of David Dong and Theo Robson here today, it is great to have you with us for our first Federal AAM Town Hall of 2026. Each of these town halls are designed to serve as that consistent national touchpoint, bringing together industry and government to align on progress, challenges, and continue advancing towards AAM operations in Canada. For today's agenda, we're going to begin with an update from CAAM, where we will share some key progress across national collaboration, industry engagement, and the steps we are taking to support operationalization in 2026. From there, we'll turn to our colleagues at Transport Canada, who will provide an update on the ongoing regulatory work and broader federal alignment across AAM and RPAS priorities. And then we'll move to conclude with NAV CANADA, where we will hear some of the latest developments from our ANSP on airspace integration, operations, and what is required to safely integrate these new aircraft into our Canadian airspace. As always, through today's session, we encourage you to stay engaged and share your questions through the Q&A function in Microsoft Teams. Our team at CAAM will try to capture everything today and follow up where needed to ensure that the conversations continue beyond our session today. So with that, let's dive into some of the important updates from the CAAM ecosystem. Now, as the global conversation evolves, so does our approach at CAAM. Our international partners and our ecosystem here are aligning more closely with that evolving definition of advanced air mobility currently being shaped by ICAO. So what does AAM mean for us? At CAAM, advanced air mobility is that evolution of air transportation driven by an ecosystem brought together through new propulsion systems, thinking of our electric, hydrogen, and hydrogen technologies, new aircraft architectures, designs optimized for various ranges, and new operating missions, redefining how we move people, goods, and services both in our urban and regional environments. Now, regardless of the definition, the goal remains clear: to make air mobility safer, more sustainable, and more accessible for communities across Canada and around the world. And we like to put this in a visual that showcases advanced air mobility and its examples through this evolving aviation ecosystem. It begins with all of the work coming out of the RPAS sector, as seen here with the example of Indra Robotics and their Wayfinder, that began some of their commercial operations back in 2016. Similarly, our work also includes all of the great insights coming from Harbour Air here on the retrofitting of existing aircraft, shown with the electric eBeaver, that started flying on some of their test flights back in 2019. Similarly, we need to make sure that all that progress plays into our future aviation training sector for the pilots needed for this industry. This is shown by an example here, having completed Sealand's electric flight with the Pipistrel Velis Electro, having their first flights back in Canada back in June of 2024. Then we look at the expanding conventional takeoff and landing aircraft, or the eCTOL, shown here with the Beta ALIA CX300, having an expected timeframe to be certified in Canada with around that 2028 timeframe, similar to what the US is looking at as well. These developments also go into our Canadian stars here with the with the development of the Horizon aircraft Cavorite X7, one of the hybrid aircraft looking at that electric vertical takeoff and landing component, and with a time frame to operations by that 2030 framework. And similarly, supporting a lot of the autonomous aircraft developments, shown here with the Wisk Gen 6 aircraft, having a complete electric aircraft on the vertical takeoff and landing side, expected to be certified for operations in that 2030 plus timeframe as well. And lastly, we have to ensure our ability to pull upon new energy systems like hydrogen for the commercial aviation applications that have been explored by projects like the Airbus Zero-E in the past. This gives us a longer pathway into the commercial aviation sector, into that entry to service of 2035 plus. Now, similarly, the important piece is that no singular aircraft will serve all missions and operating cases in Canada, and CAAM is working under this greater AAM umbrella to ensure our Canadian ecosystem is prepared and ready for these operations north, east, south, and west across our country. So before we dive into our content for today, I want to take a moment to frame what we mean when we talk about the CAAM ecosystem. We divide our ecosystem into the following key tiers, starting with our national board members, who are then supported by our project partners, our engaged members, and our general ecosystem. All of these combine together to form our member ecosystem. And since day one, CAAM has been focused on building that pan-Canadian network that brings together the full spectrum of players needed to operationalize advanced air mobility. But more than just a network, we've created that tiered engagement model, one that reflects the depth of time and financial commitment across our members to help enable each partner to contribute in the way that aligns best with their role, resources, and readiness. We're proud to showcase a little bit of this structure here today and to highlight the members who are helping bring this ecosystem to life. We also need to make sure that Canada's role in advanced air mobility is strongly represented in the leading international organizations shaping the sector. At the same time, we are working across the Canadian aerospace ecosystem with our international, national, provincial and municipal partners to ensure that advanced air mobility is both accessible and relevant to them and their members. Every part of the ecosystem has a critical role to play in building this future, and CAAM is here to connect those voices, align priorities, and make sure Canada is not only keeping pace, but leading in this global transformation. This slide here reflects the strength of CAAM's partner ecosystem, spanning international partners, national leadership, and those provincial and municipal champions, all working together towards AAM implementation. At CAAM, our role is to help unify that national voice and strengthen alignment across the system, enabling Canada to move from strategy into operations. So it's a real privilege also for us on the international side to have Canada host and work alongside of many of these international organizations right here in our country. This gives us a unique opportunity to stay closely aligned with global developments while also help shape them. At CAAM, once again, our role is to bring these international perspectives together with our national priorities here and ensure that Canada moves forward in harmony with the global AAM landscape, not behind it. And then as we transition to the national level, it's equally important to recognize the strength of these national partners across our country. From Transport Canada and NAV CANADA to our industry associations, research institutions, these are the core foundations helping to enable AAM nationwide across Canada. At CAAM, once again, our role is to bring these groups together, ensure that alignment across policy, operations, and innovation, so we can move forward as one coordinated national ecosystem. And lastly, as we bring it to our provincial and municipal levels, this is the groundwork where AAM truly begins to take shape. From economic development agencies to our regional aviation partners, these organizations are critical in translating our national strategy into real-world implementation. Our work is to ensure that alignment carries through locally, enabling our regions across Canada to adopt AAM in a way that is practical, scalable, and of course connected to the broader national vision. And to conclude with, this helps support our regards into our regards of our national authorities as well. We are privileged to help drive the coordination between Transport Canada and NAV CANADA and the broader AAM industry through our national AAM integration team. Our role is simple: convene and unify the voices from across Canada and beyond, bringing those industry opportunities, concerns, and challenges directly to our regulatory authorities. By working alongside our national board, we ensure that the industry's input is actively helping shape Canada's pathway to operations. Now, moving into some of the CAAM updates, I wanted to share a few highlights from across our national ecosystem as well, where we are seeing some of that momentum as we continue to advance towards operations here in Canada. We'll begin with an announcement that we are very pleased to welcome Ranbir Singh from Air Canada to the CAAM National Board. Ranbir has brought over 15 years of experience from aviation, spanning frontline airport operations through to network planning and regional market development. Today, he leads Air Canada's regional airline partnerships and plays a key role in connecting communities across the country. What makes this especially important for our work at CAAM is his deep, practical understanding of regional air mobility, which is central to how AAM will be implemented in Canada and the unique operating geography we have across this country. At the same time, we want to extend our sincere thanks to Amit Serene for his leadership and contributions as a CAAM National Board member over the past years. We're thrilled to have Ranbir join us as we continue to move towards operations. Building more on the defense side, what we are seeing as the results of Canada's new defense industrial strategy coming out is a clear signal of the alignment between defense priorities and aerospace, including advanced air mobility. Many of the core technologies behind AAM, from electric propulsion to hybrid technologies, autonomy, and digital airspace systems, are now being recognized as those dual use capabilities. With aerospace platforms, avionics, and communications identified as sovereign priorities for Canada, and new investments flowing into R&D, testing, commercialization, this creates a strong momentum and tailwind for our Canadian companies operating in this space. For our ecosystem, the takeaway is simple. AAM is no longer just a future mobility conversation. It is now being directly tied into national capability, our resilience, and economic growth of the country. Next, I wanted to highlight an important milestone for our community, the conclusion of our second cohort of small, medium enterprises that were led through CAAM's National Research Council Industrial Research Assistance Program. This program brought together a select group of Canadian companies, including Green Aerospace, Shearwater AI, and Air Market, each supported by our industry experts to help accelerate their growth and commercial readiness for advanced air mobility in Canada. The purpose of this program was simple but powerful: to provide Canadian innovators with direct access to specialized technical leadership, ensuring that their solutions can scale into real-world advanced air mobility operations. And so as we look ahead, I want to highlight 2 delegation opportunities on the horizon for our community, along with funding support available. First, our upcoming Europe Defense and AAM delegation, which will bring Canadian industry directly into conversations with some of our leading global European partners. And second, at the conclusion of 2026, CAAM will be leading the Canadian delegation to ICAO's second Advanced Air Mobility Symposium, scheduled to be hosted in Bangkok, Thailand. And importantly, CAAM delegate members may be eligible for up to 50% funding support to help offset participation costs. So over our presentation today, if you're interested, our team will be sharing the expression of interest links to ensure you're a part of these conversations and remain updated on the information. To share a little bit more about these delegation trips, the Europe Defense and AAM delegation will be taking place from May 25th to June 5th, 2026, across Portugal, Germany, and Italy. We've designed it as a 4-part journey, starting in Portugal with attendance to 2 major global conferences, that of CANSO's Airspace World and AED Days just west of Lisbon. Canada will once again be featured as a partner country at AED Days in collaboration with our Canadian Embassy in Lisbon. Both are critical forums for helping to engage our regulators, ANSPs, and of course, defense and future AAM leaders, helping to shape the future of aviation. We'll then move over to Hamburg, Germany, and Rome, Italy, focusing on more OEM engagement and airport integration of this new technology. The important part, though, is the flexibility in this delegation trip. You can choose to attend the full program or select 1, 2, or 3 segments that align with your priorities in becoming a delegate member of the trip. The flexibility is yours. And with up to 50% funding support potentially available, this is a strong opportunity to plug into that global momentum. Looking forward at the end of this calendar year, we're looking at December 2026, where CAAM will be leading the Canadian delegation to the ICAO Advanced Air Mobility Symposium, hosted in Bangkok, Thailand. This symposium will build directly on the momentum from the inaugural ICAO AAM Symposium that Canada hosted in Montreal back in 2024, and represents one of the most global forums helping shape the future of aviation. While our Europe delegation focuses on the industrial partnerships and defense collaboration, ICAO is where global policy, safety frameworks, and that operational standards will continue to be defined. CAAM members are once again invited to join the delegation with that funding potential available, helped with support through Global Affairs Canada. All right, so now we're going to shift from the CAAM updates to the broader ecosystem. I want to highlight a few key developments across our industry where we're continuing to see that momentum and progress towards operations. Under our industry updates, one key development that we need to highlight is the continued progress from CAAM member Horizon Aircraft. Horizon continues to progress towards their first flight of the Cavorite X7 hybrid eVTOL aircraft and recently announced 2 key supplier selections. RAMPF, Ramp Composite Solutions, will build the fuselage, while North Aircraft Industries will manufacture the wing, both including the sliding covers that house the aircraft's 12 electric lift fans. These agreements build upon Horizon's earlier propulsion partnership with Pratt & Whitney Canada and showcasing the importance here that it's not just the technology, but the fact that this work is happening here in Canada, with components expected to arrive in the Lindsay, Ontario location later this year for assembly. Another important signal globally right now was the launch of the US eVTOL Integration Pilot Program, or eIPP, that we're proud to see CAAM members of Beta Technologies and Joby Aviation playing leading roles in that space. Beta has been selected for 7 of the 8 launch programs, deploying both CTOL and VTOL aircraft across cargo, medical, and logistics missions in over 20 states. And at the same time, Joby is advancing early passenger operations across multiple regions, working directly with state and federal partners to begin real-world air taxi services this year. Now, what makes this program significant is not just the technology, but the model. The eIPP program brings together those regulators, operators, and local governments to accelerate deployment through that coordinated real-world operations. For Canada, this is a clear signal of where the industry is heading. It reinforces our importance of alignment with our federal authorities and industry to create a similar pathway for deployment. And importantly, with companies like Beta already operating charging infrastructure at one of our airports in Canada and looking at more, these strong partnerships can showcase how it can expand across our ecosystem. This is the shift from demonstration to operations, and it's happening now. Another piece we wanted to highlight in our ecosystem is that of pilot training. We're thrilled to see CAAM members of Joby and CAE advancing the next generation of pilot training infrastructure, where the development of their highly advanced flight simulators are purposely built for air taxi operations and Joby's use. These systems are designed to replicate the real-world urban environments, helping ensure our pilots are trained not just for the aircraft, but for the new complexities introduced in AM operations. Once again, with CAE's deep presence here in Canada and growing in the global sense, this is an area where we have a real opportunity to continue our leadership and showcase the great work of Canadian companies. On the global stage, Canada continues to show our strong leadership in advanced air mobility. We had the privilege of attending and speaking at the Asia Pacific Region Advanced Air Mobility Summit in Singapore, where CAAM had the opportunity to show Canada's national approach to building our integrated AM ecosystem, highlighting our focus on safety, collaboration, and some of those real-world operations. This was also complemented by our strong presence at the Singapore Airshow, one of the world's premier aerospace events in the Southeast Asia region, where that industry, government, and of course our international partners were aligning on some of the future developments in our industry. What is clear is that AM is continuing to develop across the world and not just in isolation, but Southeast Asia will continue to play a larger role for Canada and our partnerships there as well. So as we look ahead, the conversation doesn't stop here at our federal AM Town Hall. It needs to continue, and we've expanded and launched our platform for our provincial advanced air mobility roundtables. What makes these sessions different is their structure. At the federal level, our town halls are focused on national strategy, leadership from Transport Canada and NAV CANADA, and our federal partners shaping the regulatory and policy environment. But at these provincial roundtables, this is where implementation comes to life. Our roundtables bring together our airports, municipalities, industry leaders, academia, and regional champions, creating a much more interactive forum focused on projects, challenges, and opportunities happening in their regions on the ground. This is not just a one-way update, but more of a working session. So if you're looking to understand where AAM is taking shape across different regions in Canada, or where your organization fits in, this is where the conversation continues. We encourage you to join multiple provinces, conversations, and help stay engaged to build upon this ecosystem across the country together. So we know the road to operationalization won't be easy. Significant challenges still lie ahead, and they will require our resilience, adaptability, and clear focus on scaling from entry into service into those full commercial operations, all while meeting our evolving regulatory standards and market expectations. The urgency to chart this path has never been clearer, and that's why CAAM is committed to building that robust, coordinated Canadian AAM ecosystem one step at a time. So let us be your continued trusted partner in navigating the complexities of Canada's AAM journey going forward. So as we wrap up on the CAAM portion of today's conversation, we are once again privileged to transition to our Transport Canada segment. Transport Canada has continued to be a champion and supporter of a lot of this work, and we are grateful to welcome Jeannie Stewart-Smith back to the platform, who will be sharing some of the overviews of developments coming from Transport Canada as we start off our year for 2026. So Jeannie, always as a privilege, thank you so much for being here. Grateful to yourself and the Transport Canada team, and I'm happy to pass the platform off to yourself.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, JR, and thanks for the great intro and updates with respect to where CAAM and the industry are at. It's really exciting times, which I think you'll see reflected in my presentation as well. Jeannie Stewart-Smith here from Transport Canada. I work within the Civil Aviation Strategy and Emerging Technologies team. And we're responsible for, as the name suggests, kind of everything that falls into the sort of new, innovative, wonderful aircraft that we are starting to see come onto the market. We're a relatively new branch in the last year or so, but we are the evolution of what was previously known as the Remotely Piloted Aircraft Systems Task Force, which has been around since 2017. So many of us, including myself, have been around and working in this space for that long. So I know there's been a little bit of concern, perhaps, that a strategy and emerging technologies branch is a bunch of new people who haven't worked on these files before, and that's certainly not the case. It's very much still your core contacts at TC who have been working in the RPAS space for a long time. And with the addition of teams that are responsible for commercial space launch and some broader aviation safety and security policy direction setting as well. So we can go to the next slide, please, David. Great. So as I was preparing for this presentation, I was trying to think of, what ties all of the recent developments together since our last town hall. And it's really just an onslaught of news when it comes to aerospace. If you are, trying to keep up in this space, it's really challenging to keep up with the news, and that's what makes this period really exciting for all of us. And the attention that, as JR noted, that advanced air mobility and other innovative aviation technologies are getting has really kind of come to the forefront in the last little while. And so I threw on this slide a screenshot from LinkedIn of our Minister McKinnon, who's been responsible for transport, including the aviation portfolio, since last fall. But he spoke recently at the Aerospace Industries Association of Canada event on the Hill. And he highlighted, the important words here of aviation and aerospace driving innovation, trade, and connectivity, themes that you'll hear JR talk about and you'll hear myself talk about as well. Our Director General, Felix Meunier, also attended the event, and his remarks really focused on the aviation program's priorities, and those include sustainability, RPAS, advanced air mobility, and space launch. So very much in alignment here. We can go to the next slide, please. So I'm not going to try and cover all of the news in the aerospace sector in the last little while, but I did want to highlight a few sort of broader pieces that we're keeping an eye on here at Transport Canada. And that, I wanted to make sure that all of you are well aware of too. So you might see the Defense Industrial Strategy come up a couple of times today and in subsequent meetings. But that obviously has been a major signal from the government with respect to priority areas. There's a clear focus on the importance of new technologies in the Defense Industrial Strategy. Aerospace, space, uncrewed, and autonomous systems are all highlighted as key capabilities in this strategy. And so this is further reinforced by the announcement that there is also going to be investment in a new drone innovation hub for the National Research Council, which is going to advance research, development, and commercialization of drone technologies for Canada's defense, security, and dual use sectors. And you'll hear that word being used a lot these days, dual use, and that's where really the link is between the defense applications and Transport Canada's role is with respect to these technologies being considered for both civilian and defense applications, which just further reinforces the need for Transport Canada and defense to work closely together to align requirements and make sure that these technologies can be used in both environments. So the NRC's Drone Innovation Hub, importantly, is going to be looking at both drone development, but also counter-drone development and testing capabilities. So both kind of thinking about that technology pushing side, but also the very important discussion that we're continuing from last year with respect to how do we mitigate the security risks that are associated with the technology. So we are very much still working with defense, with the National Research Council, with NAV Canada to sort of understand the full scope and implications of the defense industrial strategy. And I know we're all reading it with interest and looking at sort of, you know, where the demands are going to come. But certainly, you know, the expectation is that there is going to be a significant coordination between defense and Transport Canada in order to enable, particularly on the dual use side, a lot of these technologies. So we're looking forward to continued discussions with respect to how the strategy is going to be implemented, but it is really exciting from an aerospace technology perspective. The second thing I wanted to highlight that happened, you know, recently, and when I say recently, we're even talking in the last week, were announcements with respect to investments in sovereign space launch. It's never a dull moment around here. We're really excited to see these announcements come in last week to support the growing demand to have a physical location in Canada where space launch activities can take place. And the announcement also shared the selection of innovators for the first round of Launch the North. And these grants are designed to support the development and demonstration of breakthrough technologies to advance Canada's sovereign space launch capabilities. So it's really, really exciting stuff. It's really a big step forward for the ability to conduct space launches from within Canada. And my colleagues on our space launch team are going to be heavily involved in the regulatory aspects of the commercial space launch side of things, and they'll be coordinating closely with DND on this front. They have already been working really closely together and will continue to do so. And as a sort of a side note on that, for the commercial side, Transport Canada recently published a draft of application requirements for obtaining authorization to launch. The formal title is Uncrewed, Orbital, and Sub-Orbital Rockets in Canada. So if you are interested in commenting on that, it's available on our website. And the comment period is open for a little while longer until March 31st. So if you are an organization or an individual interested in what authorization for launch is going to look like in Canada on the commercial side, please do have a look at that document and provide Transport with your comments. They'll be greatly appreciated. And then finally, perhaps not directly sort of aerospace and aviation related, but really important and exciting announcements with respect to the Arctic Infrastructure Fund. This is going to be managed by Transport Canada. And again, this is building on our theme of dual use. There was a call for proposals that came out earlier this month to build on and expand dual use infrastructure in the Arctic. So in the context of this particular fund, we're looking at infrastructure that serves both defense and community priorities. Now, the fund is quite large, it's multimodal, but it could lead to investments in things like airport infrastructure as an example. So we are keeping an eye on that. There's obviously been a lot of focus in sort of public discourse around the importance of the Arctic with respect to sovereignty and security. And there's a lot of opportunity for better connecting communities in the north. So we're keeping an eye on this one as well for potential sort of aviation and aerospace impacts. We'll go to the next slide, please. So taking a step back to the international side of the discussions, I just wanted to provide you with a quick update as well with respect to the International Civil Aviation Organization's work on advanced air mobility. So if you've heard me give these updates before, you'll know that I sit as the Canadian member on the Advanced Air Mobility Study Group. And that group has been working for a couple of years now to ultimately develop recommendations for ICAO with respect to how to progress and advance international rules so that they can accommodate, facilitate, and enable advanced air mobility operations in the future. So this is, there's a picture of us all standing in the snow there. I think this is the first time we've taken a picture outside at our December meeting. I'm not sure everyone was thrilled by that, but they were good sports about it. And so the group gets together twice a year to progress this work. And there's been some notable progress in the last little while that I wanted to highlight for you. One is that the study group's been working for a while on a global vision for advanced air mobility. And this is a document that sort of describes the potential of what the future aviation system could look like with advanced air mobility and other technologies entering into the aviation ecosystem. So we finally completed a draft of that document, and it went earlier this year for internal ICAO consultation. So it was presented to 42 other ICAO expert groups for feedback and input. And I share that number with you because I think it gives you a good sense of how broad the potential impacts of advanced air mobility are, that we needed to go to that many other ICAO expert groups to make sure we have covered our bases, make sure we've looked at the potential impacts sort of across the system. And great credit to our colleagues in the ICAO Secretariat who managed all of these consultations. They've been done at great speed and with great success. We've got a lot of really good feedback from the other expert groups with respect to the work that's been done so far. And a really great appreciation for, a little bit more of an in-depth discussion of what advanced air mobility means, because for those of us that don't, live and breathe this every day, it sometimes seems either a little bit like a fuzzy concept or maybe a little bit less clear than, those of us that are sort of in the weeds with respect to how far the aircraft designs and operational plans have really come in the last couple of years. So we're in the process of going through all of those comments on the vision document with an eye to producing another version later this year. And in parallel, what we're doing is we've kicked off a review of all 19 ICAO annexes to identify areas where existing standards and recommended practices, or SARPs in the ICAO acronym world, might be insufficient or absent for AAM. So this is a really important exercise because, as we know from having regulated RPAS within the context of the Canadian aviation regulations, and many of our colleagues have faced similar issues internationally, is when you're bringing the new technologies into existing regulations, there are often pretty significant gaps. There might be existing rules that don't work well for the new aircraft types or the new operations. And so we are undertaking a comprehensive exercise to really make sure we look at all of the ICAO SARPs so that we can provide that best information to ICAO with respect to next steps. And that gap analysis is then going to be turned into those final recommendations for ICAO on AAM. So I really see the gap analysis work that we're doing right now as really kind of fundamental to setting us up for success with respect to the clarity and comprehensiveness of our recommendations to ICAO going forward. So this is another area where it's going to be a busy year in 2026 with respect to the progress that we hope to make here. And then turning to sort of more back to the domestic side of things, I'll go to the next slide, please. Just wanted to also highlight a few things from an RPAS, or remotely piloted aircraft systems perspective. You'll recall that last year in 2025, we expanded Part 9 of the Canadian Aviation Regulations to allow, either some people will say we were the first, some people will say we were among the first globally, but to allow lower risk beyond visual line of sight and a few other types of operations on a more routine basis. So those regulations and those amendments are now fully in force as of November of last year. And we've been really excited by the uptake. So I want to share just a couple of numbers. So far, we've issued 447 RPAS operator certificates, and we've issued 411 level 1 complex pilot certificates. And both of those things are needed for Canadians to conduct beyond visual line of sight operations. So we're looking at, more than 400 potential service providers for beyond visual line of sight in the country. And that number is going to continue to grow as we move into hopefully nicer weather, although it seems like it's never going to stop snowing here in Ottawa. But as we move into sort of the first true operating season with these beyond visual line of sight rules in place, we're really excited to see how this year goes, and to do an evaluation of that sort of first year of regulatory implementation, looking ahead into 2026 and 2027. So what you can expect from us with respect to regulatory developments specific to RPAS going forward is TC plans to issue a proposal for remote identification and a few other airspace and related issues this year for public comment. And again, I think the theme you're going to see throughout my presentation is this is going to be a year of heavy consultation and a lot of discussion between TC and industry, between other departments, federal departments, and other organizations in industry. So I'll just echo, the need for communication, collaboration, and coordination, I think is going to be, again, really important this year. But we're really excited to get that discussion paper out to all of you. Many other countries have decided to pursue remote identification as a means of, both allowing for some of what Alan will probably touch on in his presentation, but with respect to traffic management systems of the future, but also increasing that accountability for our operators, improving the ability for transport and other enforcement partners to enforce existing rules. So that's going to be an important discussion that we're looking forward to having this year. And then looking a couple years down the road, but it is a project that we are going to need to start working on in due course, will be the coming into applicability of ICAO's rules for international RPAS operations. So that's a very sort of specific subset of RPAS operations. But ICAO has landed or nearly landed on what those amendments to the various annexes will look like. And those are expected to be in place in roughly the 2030 timeframe. So Canada, as a signatory to the Chicago Convention and an ICAO member, needs to bring these into the Canadian regulatory framework so that we ensure that we're harmonized with our international partners. So you can expect to see conversations from us picking up on the domestic implementation of those international RPAS rules coming up as well. We can go to the next slide, please. I wanted to highlight this one as well for you. This is, again, maybe a bit niche, but there has been a lot of interest in the past years with respect to application of pesticides from RPAS. And while this isn't a Transport Canada area of responsibility, many of those comments have come through my team, and so we understand the importance of this issue to a subset of our RPAS operators. And so I wanted to just highlight that in this forum as well, that Health Canada's Pest Management Regulatory Agency has put out a consultation paper that, again, closes March 25th. So I hope you all have lots of time to read and comment on a couple of these documents, because it all seems to be in the same time frame. This one, it is quite short, I'll give you that heads up, but if this is an area that interests you, I think this is a really important read. PMRA has proposed a policy for permitting the application of certain pesticides that have already been approved for aerial application. They would extend that approval to application by RPAS as well. And I understand that this will remove a fairly significant roadblock for many operators who are interested in this specific use case. So if it is of interest to you, please do comment on the Health Canada proposal. I've linked it on the slide. Perhaps we can also provide it afterwards as well, but that is another area that is moving forward quite quickly in Canada. Then we'll go to the next slide. Continuing on the theme of regulatory consultations, a couple other things back to things that are within Transport Canada's purview that may be of interest to you. In particular, we've released a preliminary issue and consultation assessment on operational evaluations. That's when you've got a little bit more time on that one. The comment period closes May 2nd. But this is an important piece to talk about because the operational evaluation is a step in the approvals process after design certification. And, you know, Transport Canada has a system for operational evaluations. We're looking at, you know, bringing some of these things more clearly into the regulatory process, providing additional certainty for industry. And this is particularly important because an operational evaluation needs to be done when there is a new or modified aircraft added to your operations. And so, you know, as soon as I see new aircraft, I'm thinking about this community and, you know, thinking about bringing in AAM aircraft into your fleets or starting up an operation with AAM aircraft. Understanding the operational evaluation process and commenting on it at this stage would be hugely appreciated. A preliminary issue and consultation assessment is a pre-regulatory step. So we're not at the point of proposing specific regulatory amendments. It is really a fairly short paper that is seeking kind of open feedback from the industry with respect to this subject. So I would encourage you, if this is an area that you think will impact your operations in the future, please do comment on that piece as well. And then this may or may not touch on your areas of interest, but there's a couple fee modernization consultations open as well on personnel licensing and training and aircraft airworthiness and maintenance approvals. The comment period for both of those closes in mid-April. And so that you don't have to hear me list these off every time we have one of these meetings, or if you want to make sure that you're not missing out on the consultations from Transport Canada, please do sign up for the Canadian Aviation Regulation Advisory Council. You'll get the notifications directly in your inbox, and that way you'll make sure that you don't miss out on any of the regulatory consultations that the department is running with respect to aviation. We can go to the next slide, please. So this one isn't about you giving us feedback, although that was the theme of the previous slides, but it is about how we can continue to improve the way we do communication and outreach. So that is something my team is looking very closely at on a couple of different fronts. In the fall, we launched a survey of recreational drone operators to seek feedback directly on our outreach efforts, particularly with a focus on those recreational drone operators. We received 712 responses that we're going through, and we're aiming to share those results and how this will impact our outreach efforts going forward in the spring of this year. So we are really excited to kind of continue to improve the way that we communicate safety information to our recreational drone operators. That's important not only to them, but also to the rest of the aviation community so that we can keep everyone aware of what's going on in the system and safe and allowing everybody to continue to operate. So looking forward to that. That'll be a piece that we'll put out for you in the coming months. And then in parallel, we're also reviewing the sort of ever-growing and ever-evolving needs for stakeholder communication. So we've had a newsletter since 2019 in various formats that's been called the Drone Zone. And we have something like 1,600 subscribers to date. And it's been a really effective way for Transport Canada's aviation program, and specifically in the emerging technology RPAS space, to get information out. But as our sort of mandate grows beyond RPAS into AAM and space and other emerging technologies, we're reevaluating what products TC, and particularly the strategy and emerging technologies aviation team, needs to put out, what would be useful to you to hear from us on what frequency, what kind of information, how targeted these products should be. There is some, overlap between the interests in, perhaps RPAS, AAM, and space. But does everyone want all of that information all of the time? Maybe, maybe not. That's the kind of feedback we'll be looking for and looking to have those discussions with respect to whether we need some kind of AAM-specific communication whether the Drone Zone newsletter can kind of serve all needs, or whether we should be looking at a bit more of a targeted approach. And the last thing I'll add on that is TC organized a delegates workshop in fall 2025. That was organized by my colleagues on our certification team. And one of the things that came out of that workshop was that industry identified the need to establish more engagement activities between TC and industry, really at that subject matter level, a subject matter expert level, outside of active certification activities. And so that feedback was well understood by the TC teams. And one of the key themes or topics that industry raised as well was talking about new technologies and how that's going to impact the certification process and vice versa. So my colleagues are also working on a strategy to establish more regular cadence of engagement on the highly technical issues related to certification and new technologies. And so we're really excited to see them make progress on that as well. And I know the plan is to come back out to industry with that strategy once it's developed. And that'll be a really meaningful piece as well to kind of continue to build engagement, collaboration, and communication efforts between TC and industry, which I think, like JR, didn't know what your opening remarks were going to be, but you set me up very well for talking about the importance of talking in 2026 and the numerous consultations and communication pieces that are going to be coming out of TC seeking industry feedback this year. So I think with that, we can go to the next slide, which is just how to reach us if you want to reach out to sort of the broader advanced air mobility team. We've got a dedicated email address that comes into my team, and then we can help triage your questions to the right experts in the department. And we've got a couple web links there as well on AAM specifically, and then aircraft certification with TC. And then a final plug for our newsletter in its current format, the Drone Zone, but stay tuned with respect to kind of additional communication, engagement, and outreach efforts from TC on the sort of many exciting things we've been talking about today. So with that, JR, thanks for the time to provide the updates. We know that the consultation process can be quite involved for industry, and we really appreciate the time and effort that goes into commenting on the various sort of regulatory and policy proposals, because it really does help us create better products at the end of the day. Thanks.
And let's just acknowledge, Jeannie, this is going to be a momentous 2026 across the board. Too many points to highlight in one simple question, but I just wanted to bring that awareness to our ecosystem on that last focus point on the subject matter experts engaging with industry en route to that certification side. We have incredible work going on across the country, both in our hydrogen programs. Look at what Unitherapie Electronique is doing in Quebec, to our hybrid programs from Horizon, and of course, many more. This is exactly that type of engagement that's going to take us to that next level. So thank you for sharing some of those updates, Jeannie. And this is going to be many more engagements that we'll see across the ecosystem soon.
Yeah, I look forward to it. It's going to be a really interesting year.
Wonderful. Well, Jeannie, as always, such a privilege to have yourself and the Transport Canada team a part of the conversation. This is not the end of the piece here, but will only continuation. And we're grateful to transition now to our next part of the conversation, which is bringing in Alan Chapman from NAV Canada to share some of the quarterly updates from our ANSB. So as always, Alan, Jeannie has set up the platform quite well for you. So I'm happy to pass it over to yourself to go on from the updates from NAV side.
That's great, JR. Thank you. And I have to say, Jeannie does a fabulous job of setting things up for me most of the time. In fact, I'm going to start just by recognizing she talked about the work she does at ICAO. I have the pleasure of sitting next to her during those sessions. And Canada plays a very strong leadership role, excuse me, in those sessions, thanks to Jeannie being at the forefront of that. So amazing work from that and helping present Canada what Canada needs, but more than that, really just helping the whole forum move forward and solve tricky, complex conversations. So thanks to Jeannie for that from us all, I think. Okay, so moving on to NAV Canada presentation and kind of what we're going to talk about today. I'm assuming you've got the slides okay? You have a good view of those?
All good on that side, Alan?
Great, thank you. So I'm going to go through two different halves to the presentation today. The first one, a relatively brief update on what's happening in NAV CANADA around AAM, RTM space. I'll share a few highlights on that. And then I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the CANSO AAM integration working group, which I'm one of the co-chairs of. And then we'll kind of see through that how many of these pieces all fit together. And again, that collaboration piece, which keeps coming up, is going to be so critical this calendar year, both internally, domestically within Canada, but also externally across all these forums. So we'll chat more about that as we go forward. I am going to jump to talk about this slide here. Bear with me a second. Oops. I appear to have lost the slide. Bear with me just while I find out where it's got. There we go. Slides are in the wrong order. Apologies. So we're going to talk generally about RPAS traffic management to start with, and AAM, and sort of the four lenses that we use to look at this industry through. And I'll take them sort of one at a time. Starting with low-level RPAS. So this is all the work, the drone zone letter refers to all the aspects of the regulations that come under CAR Part 9, all of the work that's happening under SFOCs. And where we are today, as many of you know, NAV drone is out there successfully being used to allow operators and pilots to plan their RPAS operations, get permission where they need it in airspace, and make that ecosystem work. It was updated in November for the new regulations that came on, and it's been really interesting to start to see how people are interpreting and leveraging the new regulations, to aid their use cases, to drive into new kinds of operations. The system supports, say the regulations today. We're seeing some interesting things. So one of them I would call out is drone in the box. We've seen a lot of use of drone in the box systems, particularly on the first responder side, and combining that with sheltered operations so they can kind of fly further, and achieve some of their goals through sheltered operations. So some interesting pieces coming out there. We're seeing an increase in airport operations as well as we manage the specific mitigations that have to occur around airports. But again, some great use cases around airports as well. So we have a path that continues to move forward for our NAV drone platform. We're looking at another release coming up in the June timeframe in the summer, and then we'll have another one in the fall. Really making sure that we take into account continuing shift in the user needs, as well as looking at safety aspects and continuing to revise that product. We're also preparing for things like FIFA, making sure that we understand how the authorities want to handle those events, what our role is in airspace management. And this affects not just my team and the RPAS side of things, but, the whole organization particularly around the locations where these flights are happening. With a knock-on effect, there are significant impacts as we look at things like the FIFA Men's World Cup. So lots of planning going into things like that. So that's kind of where we are today with NAV drone and what's happening right now. As we look to the future, we've talked about this a lot in terms of the need to kind of expand and move forward in the RPAS space, the need to get into BV loss in complex airspace, etc. And so when we look at that, we've released that ConOps. We're living up to that ConOps. We've got a project in place to help us deliver on the capabilities that we need. We've been through a lot of evaluation process, looking at vendors, narrowing that down, getting us into a good place to be able to move forward. So we're looking forward to releasing more news on that later in the year as we take some more concrete steps. One of the other things, and again, this drops back into the collaboration point on this topic, is we'll be driving forward again with the RTM Advisory Council that was put in place. I think it was put in place originally in 2018. That served us as a really good platform in the early days to get advice and guidance from industry. We'll be having a couple more meetings that'll be sent out soon probably in the summer, and then in the November-December timeframe. So we'll be letting people know when and where they are. But again, that collaboration piece is going to be very important as we start to take some more concrete steps around RTM and the future of low-level flights, particularly BVLOS flights. It'll be great to have those conversations. A reminder as well what our architecture is described by in the concept of operations, and that we are intending to move to this stage of, NAV CANADA having this central core system, rFIMS, to support all the operators and pilots, but supporting them through a layer that can be delivered by RTM service providers. So, RTM service providers being able to decide whether they want to take on basic operations or advanced operations, and achieve the levels of safety and quality, etc., that will be put in place by Transport Canada and by NAV CANADA as we move forward. But this is a depiction of the ConOps that's been out since 2023. So hopefully most people are aware of that view and that perspective right now. So that's the view, I think, of all the things that are happening in the low-level airspace that I want to update you on. We'll move next to the IFR integrated space. So this is all about typically larger, heavier drones wanting to fly actually in the airspace. Our main customer for this right now is the Canadian Armed Forces, who are acquiring a new set of large RPAS that we want to get integrated. We're working with them on some initial trial operations, and then looking to the future of how we fully integrate them into the airspace. And of course, that's another program where Transport Canada and NAV CANADA are working closely together with the stakeholders to understand the aircraft, understand the performance, and what we need to do in the airspace to enable that. All that work, the Canadian Armed Forces are our first customer, but we're also seeing other areas of industry come to the forefront of this as well, and start to look at larger platforms, integrating into different airspace volumes. I was going to say higher airspace operations, but that is a specific area itself. But the truth is that RPAS and remotely piloted and autonomous flights are going to be occurring throughout the airspace. So all the principles and practices that we develop both at the very low level and that we develop in the other classification of airspace, those important principles are going to be used a lot in the coming years as we see the degree of automation, autonomy, remotely piloted work continue to grow. So large RPAS integration, a key theme for us. AAM. So as we turn all that work in autonomy, we turn all that work on remotely piloted aircraft systems and think about the longer term future of this, we move into the area that Jeannie was talking about with ICAO, the AAM study group, all the work that we're talking about on these calls, and how we get that future integrated, airspace integration to occur. I'll talk more about that, about one of the other areas that I'm involved in, which is the CANSO project on that in a little bit, but just to kind of take this at the Canadian perspective. First of all, we're sharing, we're learning and we're sharing as we go through this process. So we're presenting the Canada approach to this and kind of how we're thinking about this. And that's some of those thoughts we've shared on this quarterly town hall previously. The fact we see this sort of 3 stages of work. The first stage is to bring in, the early adopters of this, traditionally looking at traditional aircraft, piloted in the first instances, operating very similar to aircraft, to either helicopters or traditional aviation. So we're looking at that as the first phase and kind of how we need to amend our procedures, what we need to do to kind of get them into the airspace. Second piece of that is, okay, now we're starting to scale. Now we're starting to see some growth in this area. We may need to do some different things from the airspace from the airspace design. Lots of talk around corridors, what they would look like, what that would mean in this space, but looking at specific airspace design elements, looking at more procedural changes and how we have to amend staffing, etc., to deal with all the things that will happen in that middle phase. We also expect, as part of that middle phase, to see some of the remotely piloted aircraft, eVTOL, come into trials at least before we get to stage 3 or phase 3, which we see as being more autonomous vehicles, more remotely piloted vehicles, much higher scale, much higher demand. So, we don't know precisely what the timing of those 3 phases is, but we are monitoring and watching closely, and particularly things that JR pointed to earlier in the meeting around the programs that have just been put in place to expand that operation. So we monitor all of those things closely, and that's the learning. So as I said, we're learning and we're sharing. We're learning what's happening in other parts of the world. We're learning from our peers in different areas as well, and we're out there sharing some of the perspectives that are going on. So that's kind of how we look at the strategy through to the operational integration piece for AAM right now. And I'll talk about the longer term vision on the next set of slides and how that comes together. Finally, I'll touch on the drone. Finally, in this piece of the puzzle, I'll touch on the drone safety and incident response area. We have Combination Transport Canada, I should say, has recently launched the drone incident response protocol. This is a really important piece of work for us, because what this does is it allows Canada to get very clear, particularly around airports and airport authorities, and there's going to be an equivalent to this for other critical infrastructure later. But for us, to have a conversation around how we specifically manage, the incidents that may occur, and as we're seeing around the world, drones aren't always used in the most positive of way. We see a huge amount of the positive use of drones in Canada, thankfully, but we see other uses as well. And so, we want to make sure that as a country, we're set up well to deal with incidents of either just carelessness, where people don't understand what's going on, or worse, and that we have the right level of response, and that everybody can execute that in a diligent way without over escalating, because we've seen some of that in the past in other countries where there's been an incident and immediately an airport gets closed, having a massive impact on supply chain when it maybe wasn't necessary to do that. So we want to get to a level where we understand what's happening, we understand the credibility of it, we understand what risk or threat it represents, and we can then we can assign a level to that activity, and we can respond appropriately as the air navigation service provider, the airport, the government operations centre if needed, the police of jurisdiction, RCMP, etc., all of the different stakeholders who would be involved in an incident like that, including ultimately Canadian Armed Forces. So it's a really good document. My thanks to TC for the work that the aviation security team within the strategy and emerging technology team put into getting this document out. It's been through lots of revisions, lots of work over the years, lots of tabletops to prove this with airport authorities and NAV. And now we've got this document out there. So we'll be putting together specific agreements with airport authorities to really embody that and make sure everybody's trained and aware on how to deliver against it. So that was the end of the sort of NAV Canada piece. I'm going to switch into the next sort of half of the conversation, which is around the CANSO side and the AAM integration working group. And again, this will be an illustration of how some of the many things we're talking about come together here as well. So CANSO, if you're not aware, is an association set up globally, predominantly set up for ANSPs, but its membership is actually broader than that. There's about 200 members of CANSO, about 95, I think, 95, 98, something like that, are ANSPs. The other 100 roughly are from industry, different sections of industry, OEMs, different providers, suppliers, etc. So it's a really good sort of catchment of different organizations within this. And it's all about future skies. It's all about making sure that we are, as ANSPs, sharing best practices and helping shape the aviation ecosystem as we move forward. So recently, CANSO restructured some of its working groups and its kind of the structure of how it operates on the operational and safety side. And so a new work group was formed, which is the integration working group for AAM. I'm one of the co-chairs, together with Elizabeth, who works in the ANSP in the UK, NATS, and Brandon Lint, who is a lead for certification and regulatory affairs within SkyGrid, which is, I'm sure many of you know, Boeing company. So Brandon works closely with the other elements of the organisation, including WISC there. So really, really good sort of set of different skills across the co-chairs of this organisation. We had our first meeting recently. First face-to-face meeting in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi. I'm pleased to say that ended a couple of weeks before other things started in the Middle East. But it was a really good exercise, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So just to give you some context for this working group right now, there are something like 50 organizations. Of those organizations within CANSO, about 50 of those are represented on this working group. And again, that ranges from ANSPs through to regulators, aerospace manufacturers, etc. Lots of different perspectives, which is exactly what we need in this working group to come into this. I'll talk about the work plan and the work that the team's doing around this right now. This working group is engaged with, but there's also 3 external kind of support efforts as well. So CANSO, this AAM integration working group, also is trying to serve the needs of ICAO. So the work that Jeannie is doing and the rest of the organisation with ICAO are doing may come to and have, in this case, come to the working group and say, look, can you help us with this piece of this puzzle so that we can move faster and kind of understand the complexities of a particular area? So in this case, the gap analysis, can you help us with the gap analysis? There's some annexes we could do with CANSO members looking at for us. So that's one of the areas that we're looking at. And again, it shows that collaboration and the tight integration between these activities. We also work closely with the Safety Standing Committee within CANSO. So how do we think about safety, right? The most important aspect of aviation. How do we think about that relative to AAM, and how do we blend those two things together? And then finally, there was another initiative set up which really took a step back and looked at the broad aviation design really globally and like long-term future, how's this going to look? And that was put together as the complete air traffic system, originally created by CANSO, but it meant to be bigger than CANSO in its effect. And so we work closely with that group as well, and we sort of trigger meetings with that broader group when we need to do consultation and get work on their work streams. So 0 consecutive years running. It's a new work stream. We're starting. It's the early days. We're putting together what do we need to be successful. What do we need for our members and the industry to be successful in these places as we move forward. And we think there's a couple of topics. We're kind of bundling this all together under a guidance framework. So that's our sort of first thought on how this is going to exist and live. And there are 3 specific deep dives within that, but then there's a whole list of other topics that we've been asked to look at, and I'll share that list with you in a moment. There's a lot on there. But as we look at this guidance framework, the 3 areas of really sort of deep consideration are flight rules. A topic that anybody who's in AM has been exposed to in some ways. What do we do with flight rules? We've got IFR, VFR, arguably you could call VLOS, BVLOS flight rules as well. But what do we do with that sort of as we move forward into a space of more autonomy in digital skies? Also, the roles and responsibilities, as we look forward. So you just heard me talk about this new role of RTM service providers that we're going to be bringing forth in Canada to take part in the overall ecosystem. Well, what are the roles and responsibilities, and how does all of that work, and what guidance can we put in place to help all the ANSPs and other organizations out there think about that? And then the last deep dive area is it's a whole area of automation and automated traffic management system. We talk about rFIMS for the low level. NAV CANADA is also embarking on a journey to modernize with TVO and new systems behind that. Where does this automation really come to the forefront? How do we think about that as we move forward across the whole aviation ecosystem? So some really important deep dive topics. The 3 support areas I listed, I talked about those on the last slide. And then just to finish off on this one, I won't go through these in detail. There's just a lot of areas that we've been asked to look at. This is just a representation of them, split between the high priority topics and the high priorities that are slightly lower than the high priority topics. Again, it's hard because there's so much change and so much potential evolution of different areas of this. There's a lot of things that sort of automatically seem like very high priorities, particularly those around safety. So lots of areas for us to be looking at, thinking about, and working on as we move forward. And then finally, what gives this working group context? It's like, so as we talk about AAM, where do we get the definition of what AAM is? Well, in that case, we looked at ICAO. We looked at ICAO and the AAM vision document to say, we're going to get behind the definition that ICAO is putting forward right now. Again, all the work that Jeannie and everybody else who's on that, who's on the ICAO study group has brought forward. That's a really key element of context for which the working group is going to, work under. But then there are these are just other examples of documents which kind of stand out as being interesting pointers to how the industry is evolving, what vision people have of it, or what's been made, more concrete, and lots of work that's gone into this thinking already. So that ranges from work done in the US, like the AAM Comprehensive Plan, through to documents put out by organizations like Boeing and SkyGrid. So there's a lot more documents than that, but these are just some of the key ones to give us context. So that's it. If anybody's inclined to be involved in CANSO working groups, please let me know. But just again, wanted to illustrate, how all of the collaboration has to occur, how that linkage is occurring at the very global level with ICAO, with some of the groups of CANSO, and the role that Canada plays in that very strongly across all elements of this global ecosystem. JR.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for giving those updates. And let's just highlight to the entire ecosystem the importance of not only your role on the CANSO board for helping to develop that AAM working group, but also CANSO relocating to Canada and Montreal to showcase what Canada's role is on that global platform. So kudos to the entire team there. I think just one summary question, and this is what similar to the Jeannie's updates as well. Where are you seeing 2026 transpire with the spillover effects of a lot of the defense applications that our industry can help rally behind that may expedite their timeframes as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we're looking at some of the funding that's being made available and asking the question, because a lot of the work we do is actually dual use. Both at the broader air traffic service perspective, but also some of the capabilities that we're putting in place. We have this long-running question debate about how do we keep this segment sustainable long term. Mm-hmm. So, funding coming into that from a dual use perspective and looking at this today is of interest. Even conversations around nav drone and the use of nav drone by D&D, and that's a very active conversation right now. So there's elements of that where that spillover come in, and we're seeing more awareness and more demands placed on us from the security and safety aspects of what might happen in the future. So some very active conversations going on right now.
Powerful. And yes, that's the kind of reminder that we'll be seeing yourself and the NAV team at the CANSO Airspace World event, and also hopefully more of the ecosystem there as well. So as always, Alan, greatly appreciate for the updates. This is going to be a powerful quarter leading up to our next town hall. So thanks for giving some of the insight to kick us off for 26.
Thank you, JR. Thank you, Cam, once again for creating the stage and bringing us together for this. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. So as we wrap up the last little bits here from our side of CAAM, if you've been thinking about how to get more involved, how do you help shape the future of advanced air mobility in Canada, the answer is simple. Come join us at CAAM. Becoming a member at CAAM really helps you connect directly to the heart of Canada's AAM industry, and where our innovation, policy, and operationalization continue to actively take shape. So whether you're a startup, major OEM, a utility company, or an airport, there is a place in the ecosystem for you. And to showcase some of the developments that we're looking at here, membership at CAAM isn't just symbolic, it's that strategic play. taking a look at different priority reservations, showcasing our facilitated networking, and of course, that participative voice in CAAM's policy and regulatory advocacy. There are even more member benefits waiting for you, but whether you're looking for funding access, insider exposure, start here. You can scan the QR code right now to start exploring more of those opportunities or sign up directly. And if you want to help shape the future of flight in Canada, this is your pathway. So as we wrap up today's session, I want to leave with one clear next step. Come get involved. If today inspired you, if you want to help shape Canada's advanced air mobility future, this is your moment. Start with joining CAAM. Membership gives you that voice in national discussions, access to global opportunities, and a seat at the table with regulators and innovators alike. Second, stay connected at our next town hall scheduled for June 11th as your streamlined source for industry updates, regulatory, and insights. And you can also use the QR code on our screen or visit our CAAM Teams link that's going to be shared in the follow-up summary email to receive future updates directly to your inbox. And to wrap up, thank you to everybody who stayed on and joined us for today. Whether you're a longtime member or a new partner or just exploring the advanced air mobility space, you are now a part of the future of flight in Canada. So let's keep the conversation going. Follow us on social, visit us at CanadianAAM.com, or drop us a line directly at info@CanadianAAM.com. On behalf of our entire team today, David, Theo, myself, and to our great speakers of Alan and Jeannie, thank you so much again for being a part of the solution. And until next time, onward and upward together. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.